At Thanksgiving dinner, my father stood at the head of the table, raised his wine glass, and made an announcement that shattered everything. "We're selling the family business," he said, eyes gleaming with pride. "And none of you are getting a single dollar." Just like that, my older brother let out a cheer and raised his glass like we'd won the lottery. My younger sister immediately grabbed her phone and began live streaming the moment. My mother quietly poured herself another drink. Classic. "And me." I just smiled, calm, almost amused, because they had no idea. The buyer, my father, was bragging about the mysterious firm offering $50 million for our family company, was me. They were toasting their own humiliation and didn't even know it yet. My name is Morgan Adams. I'm 32 years old, middle child, MIT graduate, coder, founder, CEO, and the forgotten member of one of Boston's most arrogant, self-congratulating families. A decade ago, I left this house in silence, invisible to the people who should have known me best. No support, no interest in what I had to say, no seat at the table. But this year, I came back. Not as the daughter, not as the failure, but as the woman who built something so powerful, so calculated, that it would bring this family to its knees. Before I go any further, hit the like button if you've ever been underestimated, if you've ever had someone tell you that's sweet, but let the adults handle it. I'm telling you right now, don't let them define your limits. Leave a comment. Tell me your moment, when they told you no, and you decided silently that it would become your fuel. Subscribe if you're ready to see what happened next. Because what unfolded that night was more than revenge. It was a reckoning. Let's rewind. Thanksgiving had always been a spectacle at the Adams household. Not the cozy, messy kind, where people laugh over store-bought pie. No, this was curated, polished, catered, orchestrated for maximum ego. I flew in on a Tuesday. Private jet. Black Bentley waiting on the tarmac. Not because I needed to flex, though I absolutely could have, but because timing matters. Appearances matter. My return needed to whisper power, not shout it. I stepped through to the front door of our Boston estate, wearing a fitted black Chanel dress, diamond studs barely catching the light, and a Patek Philippe watch on my wrist. Understated luxury, just enough to unsettle, not provoke. My mother answered the door, wine already on her breath. "You look different," she said, her eyes scanning me up and down. "I grew up," I replied with a smile. "It's good to see you, Mom." She pulled me into a light embrace, one arm still clutching the crystal stemware. "Your father's in his study. Big deal going through. Very hush-hush." I nodded. "I'll say hello before I unpack." Walking into that study was like stepping into a time capsule of patriarchy. Leather-bound everything, Harvard memorabilia, a framed photo of my brother shaking hands with some C-level executive, no trace of me anywhere, despite my MIT diploma hanging in a box 3,000 miles away. My father looked up from his desk, briefly surprised. "Morgan, you made it." "Smooth flight," I replied casually. "Private. It saves time." He blinked. "Private jet, that must have been expensive." "Business is good," I said, letting the silence carry the weight of that sentence. His phone rang. He waved me off. "Important. Excuse me." I used the moment to glance at the paperwork on his desk. There it was. The offer. The Everest Holdings acquisition contract. My contract. My hands didn't shake. My heart didn't pound. I had rehearsed this for years, and I had earned every detail on that page. When he hung up, he looked at me with that same condescending smirk I remembered from childhood. "You wouldn't understand. Big corporate stuff." I nodded once. "Of course. Dad." I left the study without another word. The less I said, the more he assumed. That was his fatal flaw. Always assuming, always underestimating. Later that evening, my siblings arrived. Garrett, the golden boy, 6 years older, vice president of the company since the day after he graduated with a communications degree and a hangover. "Still playing around with your little tech thing in California?" he asked. "Scotch already in hand." "Something like that," I said. Megan swept in next, makeup flawless, phone held up in a perfect selfie angle. "Morgan's here. Look at her serving CEO vibes. Y'all," she cooed to her followers. "Did you finally land a sugar daddy, sis?" "Nope," I said. "Just building one company at a time." She didn't even hear it. Too busy recording. Dinner the next day felt like a staged performance. Expensive dishes, a 25-pound turkey, gold-trimmed china and silver candlesticks tall enough to stab someone's ego. The gratitude speeches started like always. Garrett went first. "I'm thankful for another stellar quarter, for the company's continued growth, and for my new yacht, 42 feet, named her the Adams Legacy." Of course he did. Megan went next. 1 million followers. "Baby. And my collab with Luxury Life Cosmetics just dropped. I'm so grateful to represent the Adams family brand." The brand. I picked up my wine, gave a small smile, and waited. When it was my turn, I spoke softly. "I'm thankful for what rejection can teach you, for what it means to be ignored long enough that you learn how to win without needing applause." I raised my glass. "To finding your own way." Dad cleared his throat. "Well said," he muttered, clearly not sure what to do with that. He stood next, glass lifted, his voice loud and commanding. "I have an announcement, one that affects all of us." "Here it comes." They leaned in. He smiled. "Adams software is being sold." Gasps. Garrett choked on his wine. Megan dropped her phone. Even Mom's wineglass paused midair. "It's a great deal. $50 million. A new chapter. The buyer is a firm called Everest Holdings." He beamed. That was my moment. I set down my fork, calm, precise, like I'd practiced. "Dad," I asked. "Yes, Morgan." "Who's the buyer?" He puffed up. "I just said, Everest Holdings." I smiled. "I know, because that's me." And just like that, the entire room fell silent, frozen, until the storm broke. And trust me, that was only the beginning. They stared at me like I had just spoken in a foreign language. Garrett's wineglass slipped from his hand and shattered on the floor. The red liquid spread across the white tablecloth like blood. Megan's phone trembled in her fingers. Still live, still streaming. My father blinked. Once, twice. Then he laughed a sharp, dismissive sound. "That's ridiculous," he said. "Everest Holdings is run by Emmy Stone, a serious businesswoman, a real investor, not—" He stopped short. I reached into my handbag and pulled out a platinum business card. Clean, minimal. The Everest Holdings logo gleamed under the chandelier light. I slid it across the table toward him. "Morgan Elizabeth Stone," I said softly. "Emmy, for short." Silence. Then chaos. Garrett shot to his feet, shouting. Megan gasped and dropped her phone. My mother just sat back in her chair and reached for the bottle instead of the glass. "You're lying," my father said, voice shaking. "This is a joke." "It's not," I said. "I built Everest Holdings from the ground up. 10 years ago. After you laughed me out of the boardroom, I left Boston with $5,000 in a backpack." I didn't raise my voice. I didn't need to. Everything I have now, every dollar, every client, every acquisition I built without the Adams name, I didn't need it. In fact, it was better without it. The room swayed under the weight of what I was saying, but I stood steady, finally seen. That was the moment I had spent a decade building toward. But to really understand how we got here, you need to know what came before. long before Everest Holdings, before the secrets, before the silence. You need to understand what it was like growing up as a ghost in your own family. Our house was massive, a colonial estate in Brookline, one of Boston's wealthiest suburbs, 6 bedrooms, indoor heated pool, a lawn so big we had 3 full-time gardeners. But inside it was always about one thing. The company, Adams Software Solutions. It started with my grandfather, Robert Adams, a brilliant man who launched the business in the late 1970s from his garage. He developed one of the first inventory management systems for small manufacturers, smart, resourceful, a real builder. Then came my father, Harold. He took over in the mid-90s, scaled it, turned that $10 million regional company into a $50 million national brand. And with that success came ego. At every holiday, every dinner, every backyard barbecue, the only thing anyone ever talked about was the business. But not in the way you might imagine. It wasn't open. It wasn't inviting. It was a club. And I was never on the guest list. There were 3 of us kids. Garrett the oldest, the heir, the future of Adams Software. He barely passed his classes in college, but came back with a vice president title waiting for him. No experience, no ideas, but a last name that was apparently enough. Then there was me, Morgan, the middle child, the quiet one, the one who actually cared about the product, who taught herself to code at age 12, who built her first app by 15, who graduated from MIT, summa cum laude, with a double major in computer science and business. None of it mattered. And finally, Megan, the baby, the beautiful one, the influencer. Her job was to look perfect in front of the Adams Software sign for her lifestyle blog. She knew nothing about the business. She didn't care to. And yet she was celebrated for building the brand. Meanwhile, I couldn't even get a seat at the boardroom table. My mom, Diane Adams, elegant, polished, old Boston money, and a master at avoiding conflict. She played the role of peacekeeper, always sipping Chardonnay, always smoothing things over. Once, when I suggested a cloud-based product strategy at dinner, she gently said, "Harold, maybe we should listen to Morgan's ideas." He gave her that look, that warning stare, and she immediately changed the subject. That was the house I grew up in, a home where brilliance only mattered if it came with a Y chromosome. Still, I tried. At 22, fresh out of MIT, I pitched a revolutionary integration platform to the board, spent months preparing a full proposal, business model, technical specs, market fit. I was halfway through the presentation when my father interrupted me. "That's enough," he said. "We've seen what we need." Then he smiled, tight and patronizing. "This is all very creative, sweetheart, but we're not a startup. We're a serious company. Our clients want stability, not experiments." They laughed, moved on, forgot I was even in the room. That night, I packed my bags, moved to San Francisco, rented a tiny studio in a part of town where sirens never stopped, worked 80-hour weeks, coded during the day, slept on a futon at night, ate ramen, saved every dime. And quietly, silently, I built. I called the company Everest Holdings, because I planned to climb higher than anyone ever expected me to. I used the initials M.E., Morgan Elizabeth, and created the persona of Emmy Stone, gender neutral, mysterious, no traceable link to the Adams name. Within 3 years, I had an office in Soma and 10 employees. By year 5, I had acquired 2 tech startups and launched our flagship product, the exact kind of integration system my father had once called academic fluff. Irony's funny like that. By year 7, we were worth over $200 million. No media, no spotlight. I stayed behind the curtain. My COO did the interviews. I wore sunglasses when I flew. I turned down every award dinner and top founder list. Because I wasn't done yet. I wasn't ready to be seen. Not until the moment was perfect. Not until I could buy the company that once told me I wasn't good enough. Not until Thanksgiving. From the outside, the Addams family looked perfect. Respected name, historical house, private schools, white teeth in every holiday card. A company passed from one generation to the next like a royal crown. But beneath the surface, it was always the same script. My father played king. Garrett, his loyal knight. Megan, the polished princess. And me. I was the footnote, the ghost. Every time I visited home, even after building Everest into a real company, I would shrink back into that same old space. I wore simple clothes, answered questions vaguely, smiled politely when they asked if I was still tinkering with apps. They didn't ask for details. They didn't want to know. That suited me. Because I was watching, listening, gathering data, not just about them, but about the company. You see, Addams Software had a weakness. Several, actually. Their infrastructure was outdated. Their platform hadn't been meaningfully upgraded in over 5 years. Their user interface still looked like it belonged in 2008. They were bleeding market share, but still pretending they were on top. That's the danger of legacy. You stop seeing the cracks, especially when everyone keeps telling you how great the name sounds. So I started planning. I quietly acquired controlling interests in 2 of their top suppliers. Then I bought into one of their largest clients. I watched how their systems interacted. I tracked vendor delays, pricing fluctuations, and integration failures. It wasn't sabotage. It was strategy. Everest Holdings became the silent shadow behind the systems Addams Software relied on most. And when the moment was right, I had my CFO submit an anonymous offer to acquire Addams Software. Not to destroy it. To rebuild it. To give it the future it deserved. The offer came in clean. No red flags. A very generous $50 million valuation. Considering their performance that year, it was more than fair. My father rejected it within 10 minutes. Didn't even read it past the first page. Said it was beneath serious consideration. That was fine. The deal wasn't supposed to go through back then. I needed something else first. I needed the entire family in the same room. Thanksgiving. The perfect stage. 2 weeks before the holiday, I finalized everything, signed the contract, set the press release for 9 a.m. the morning after dinner, met with the board members, most of whom had grown tired of the company's stagnation. They were eager for the acquisition, hungry for new leadership, especially from someone who actually understood tech. After all that, I still debated going home. Was it worth it? Did I really need to see their faces when they found out? And the truth, yes. Yes, I did. Because this wasn't about money anymore. It was about being seen, finally. So I flew in early, booked the jet, called in the Bentley, packed only what mattered. A Chanel dress, a perfectly tailored Armani suit, diamond studs that caught the light just right. Nothing flashy, but everything intentional. They needed to notice. They needed to feel it. The first interaction with my dad had gone exactly as expected, mildly surprised, vaguely annoyed, dismissive, as always. Garrett greeted me with a scotch in hand and a smirk. Still doing that tech stuff, he asked, waving me off like a hobbyist. I nodded. Yep, still building things. He laughed. That's cute. I'm meeting with our top clients next week. Might even close a 7-figure deal. I bit my tongue. One of those top clients was already in my pocket. He just didn't know it yet. Megan was even more on brand. She waltzed into the living room mid-Instagram story. There she is, she squealed. Sis, you look expensive. Are we finally dressing for success, or did you just date a hedge fund guy? I smiled. No hedge fund, just work. Oh, she said, clearly disappointed. She immediately turned back to her phone and whispered, "Garrett brought his new girlfriend. She's 24 and does yoga. Like, professionally." On cue, a tall blonde walked in, all legs and Lululemon. Garrett wrapped an arm around her and said, "Amber, meet Morgan. She's my sister, the one who lives in California and does stuff." I nodded. "Nice to meet you, Amber." "The shopping in San Francisco is so good," she said. It took everything in me not to laugh. Dinner prep was underway. Caterers in the kitchen. Mom fluttering around with that same fragile smile she always wore when emotions ran too close to the surface. But Dad, he was pacing, constantly checking his phone, whispering to Mom, clutching the acquisition folder I'd already signed. I caught him on the phone once, his voice just loud enough to carry. "Yes, tomorrow, right after Thanksgiving, 50 million is the final offer. Everest Holdings has been firm." I almost laughed. Firm. He had no idea how firm I could be. That night, I walked the halls of the house I grew up in. The staircase still creaked on the third step. My childhood bedroom still had my old science fair ribbons pinned to a corkboard. A dusty MIT pennant hung above the desk, where I had once written the pitch my father never bothered to finish reading. Everything was frozen. Like the version of me they chose to remember was stuck there too. It felt surreal. To be in the past, while owning the future. Thanksgiving morning came fast. The house smelled like rosemary and butter. The long mahogany table had been set with the expensive china that only came out twice a year. Dad wore a tailored navy suit. Garrett wore smugness. Megan wore a designer dress she'd already tagged 3 brands in. And I wore silence. Because they'd all talk. They always did. But this time, I had something to say. And they weren't going to like it. I woke up early Thanksgiving morning. Earlier than anyone else. The house was still quiet, hushed in that eerie pre-dawn stillness. Only the hum of the heating system and the occasional creak of old wooden floors reminded me this was still my childhood home. I sat at the desk in my old room, still the same desk, where I once spent hours building code, writing out product plans, sketching user flows. Now, the only thing I needed to do was wait. I opened my laptop, checked the acquisition portal. The documents were all signed. The press release was scheduled to hit the wire at exactly 9 o'clock the next morning. Legal had signed off. The board had voted. The company was already mine. All that was left was the reveal. And it had to happen at the dinner table. Right where everything started. Because 10 years earlier, it was also at Thanksgiving dinner that my father crushed me. He announced Garrett's promotion to vice president on the spot without prior notice, without any conversation. Just a grand toast. He raised his glass, looked straight past me, and said, "Here's to the future of Adam's software." I sat there silent, a degree from MIT in my hand, and 3 years of tech experience under my belt, while my brother slurred thanks and promised to lead us into the next era. The next era. He couldn't even log into the back-end dashboard without help from IT. And no one cared. No one said a word. That night, I cried in the guest room, alone, humiliated, angry, but also clear. Crystal clear. I would never beg to be seen again. I wouldn't fight for scraps at their table. I would build my own. I didn't leave Boston that year out of spite. I left because I knew I could do more. And now, 10 years later, I was back not as the invisible daughter, but as the buyer. And not just of the company, but of their attention, their silence, their assumptions, their pride. All of it. By noon, the house had come alive. The kitchen staff prepped in waves. My mother darted between rooms, correcting floral arrangements and adjusting table settings. Megan filmed the entire morning for her followers, pausing every few minutes to ask, "Is this candle too much, or does the lighting make me look washed out?" Garrett complained about the wine selection. Amber, his girlfriend, sipped almond milk and giggled at everything he said. My father. He was back in his study, going over final paperwork, still convinced he had outnegotiated some faceless tech firm that had swooped in to rescue his company. He didn't know that the CEO he'd been emailing with was me. He didn't know that the Phoenix proposal he'd rejected 6 months ago was my first olive branch. A quiet offer to collaborate, to evolve the company together, to preserve the family name while bringing in real innovation. He shredded it without a second glance. He wanted legacy, but he wasn't willing to adapt. So I stopped trying to save him. I focused on protecting the business instead. The plan wasn't revenge for revenge's sake. It was surgical, clean, strategic. If I wanted to hurt him, I could have exposed his declining numbers to the press, or leaked internal emails showing poor leadership. I could have torn Adam's software down, piece by piece. But I didn't want to destroy it. I wanted to lead it the right way, with modern systems, transparent operations, forward-thinking product strategy, a team that actually cared about technology instead of just legacy titles and yacht parties. So I built my offer around value, not vengeance. I worked with a top-tier legal team to ensure the deal was bulletproof. We offered to retain 60% of the staff and reassign senior leadership gradually. We allowed the Adams name to remain on the building for now. Every clause was designed to keep the transition smooth. But nothing in that contract prepared them for the truth. That their daughter, the quiet one, the one they dismissed, was the one orchestrating it all. Dinner was scheduled for 6 o'clock. At 5:30, I got dressed. Charcoal gray suit, silk blouse, hair pulled back in a low twist, simple diamond studs, barely there makeup, confident, controlled, ready. I walked downstairs and into the lion's den. Garrett greeted me with a smirk. "Try not to talk business tonight, sis," he said. "Let the real players handle that." Megan walked by and gave me a quick once-over. "Love the power suit vibe. Are you going for intimidating investor or corporate lawyer?" "Both," I said, smiling. My mother handed me a glass of wine. "You look beautiful, darling," she said softly, then leaned in. "Your father has something to announce tonight. Be supportive, okay?" "I will," I replied. I meant it. Just not in the way she expected. The dining room had been set to perfection. Gleaming wood, bone-white china, crystal glasses, candles casting sun shadows across the table. My name card had been placed at the far end, almost like an afterthought. Classic. Garrett sat on my father's right, Megan on his left, Amber beside Garrett, my mother at the opposite end. Me. I was seated closest to the kitchen. Still the outsider. Still the one furthest from the real business conversations. But not for long. We ate in near silence for the first course. Butternut squash soup, harvest salad, then the turkey, golden and heavy with tradition. Once everyone had their plate, my father raised his glass. "As is tradition," he said, "let's go around the table and say what we're thankful for." Garrett went first. "I'm thankful for another strong year," he said. "My team crushed it, and we're in a great position to scale next quarter." He looked proud. He looked rehearsed. Then Megan. "I'm thankful for my followers, for building a brand that inspires, for collaborations that celebrate our family's legacy." Her voice sparkled. So did her filter. Then it was my turn. I set down my fork, met each of their eyes. "I'm thankful for lessons," I said, "for rejection, for silence, for being underestimated." I paused. "And for the power of patience." My father blinked. Garrett frowned. Megan tilted her head like I was speaking another language. Then Dad stood up. "I have an announcement," he said, his voice booming. He tapped his glass lightly. Everyone stopped. Even Megan put down her phone. "Here it comes." "This company, our company, has been my life's work," he began, "and now the time has come to pass the torch." He smiled wide. "I've sold Atom Software." Gasps. $50 million, he continued. "A clean deal, to a firm called Everest Holdings. They'll be finalizing everything tomorrow." I leaned forward, calm, precise. "Dad," I said. "Yes. Who exactly signed the deal?" He grinned, puffing his chest. "Top executives. One of the biggest tech investors out there. Emmy Stone." I smiled. "That's me?" For a second, no one moved. No one breathed. My words landed like a thunderclap in that perfect dining room. "That's me," I repeated, quietly. "I'm Emmy Stone." The name echoed in the silence. Garrett blinked. His fork clattered against the china. Megan's jaw dropped, her phone frozen in midair, still recording. My mother, red wine halfway to her lips, slowly lowered the glass. Her eyes locked on mine. My father just stared. And then, chaos. "What the hell are you talking about?" Garrett finally shouted, pushing back from the table so hard his chair scraped the floor. "That's not possible," my father said, shaking his head. You can't be." I reached into my purse and pulled out another business card, the platinum one I had given him earlier. I slid it back across the table. "This is my company," I said. "I founded Everest Holdings 10 years ago, and I've spent the last 18 months acquiring your top suppliers, your key clients, and finally, your entire company." No, my father said, now rising from his seat, voice shaking. "This is a stunt, a lie." "It's a signed deal," I said evenly, "fully vetted. The press release goes live at 9 o'clock tomorrow morning. The sale is final." Garrett slammed his fist on the table. "You planned this. You planned this whole dinner just to humiliate us." I looked at him calmly. "I planned this to give you all one last chance to face me, as I am, not as you remember." "You're a traitor," he hissed. "No," I said. "I'm an investor, and your company was failing. I made you a fair offer. You refused it. So I made a better one, and your board accepted." "Wait," Megan said suddenly. "Are you saying we work for you now?" "In a way," I said, "though some of you won't be working for the company at all moving forward." Garrett pointed at me. "You can't do that." I turned to him. "I can, and I will. Your department is being reviewed for ethics violations." He froze. "What are you talking about?" "I know about the embezzlement, Garrett. The $300,000 routed through fake vendor accounts. The offshore transfers. The consulting fees that never happened." His face turned pale. "I have the transaction records. I have the IP logs. I have the days you logged in from your office, alone, and moved the money." My father looked stunned. "That's not true." "It is," I said. "I didn't just buy your company. I audited it. Quietly, thoroughly. I know every weakness, every gap, every lie." Garrett's voice cracked. "You'd ruin your own brother." "I'd hold a thief accountable," I replied. "Family doesn't excuse fraud." Megan leaned back, wide-eyed. "Oh my God, this is better than reality TV." Then she blinked. "Wait, does this mean my brand is over?" "You'll figure something out," I said. "You always do." Her mouth opened to protest, then closed again. My mother finally spoke. Her voice was quiet, but steady. "All these years, you were building this." I nodded. "You told us you couldn't afford to fly home, that you were struggling." I said, "At first, I slept on the floor of a studio apartment, ate instant noodles for months. Every penny went back into the company. And I didn't tell you, because I needed you all to keep underestimating me." Dad was pacing now, eyes wide, breathing heavy. "This can't happen," he said. "I won't let it. I'll call my lawyers." "Your lawyers already approved the deal," I reminded him. They told you Everest Holdings was your best chance to stay afloat. He stopped moving. You tricked me. No, I said. I outworked you. You dismissed me over and over. I gave you every chance to see me, to believe in me. You refused. This was always the consequence. Then you're not my daughter anymore. There it was. The line. The final wall. It didn't hurt. Not the way it would have 10 years ago. I looked him in the eye. That's where you're wrong. I've always been your daughter. But now, I'm also your boss. He stormed out of the room. The study door slammed seconds later. Megan took another sip of wine. Well, that was dramatic. Garrett was gone, probably off to destroy whatever fake accounts he thought were still hidden. My mother stayed seated. She looked tired. I should go check on him, she murmured. But she didn't move. Instead, she turned to me. $200 million. I nodded. All from nothing. From what you all left me with, which, honestly, was more motivation than money. She exhaled. And for the first time in my life, she looked at me like she really saw me. Not as the background character in someone else's story, but as the lead in mine. As everyone else slowly filed out of the room one by one, I stayed seated, alone at the head of the table, right where my father had always sat. The turkey was cold. The candles had burned low. Half-filled wine glasses sat untouched. The room smelled like tradition and endings. But I wasn't done. Not yet. Because this wasn't just a moment of reckoning. This was a reset. And tomorrow, the real work would begin. The house was quiet the next morning. Too quiet. The dining room had been cleared, no sign of last night's storm, no laughter, no clinking glasses, just cold silence and the faint smell of leftover turkey. I was already dressed. Black tailored suit, minimal makeup, hair pulled into a clean twist, the same look I wore in boardrooms, the same look I had worn when I closed the acquisition. By 7 o'clock, I was in the kitchen, sipping coffee from the mug I used as a teenager. Maria, our longtime housekeeper, gave me a knowing glance as she passed. No one else had come downstairs. Not yet. At 7:30, my father appeared in the doorway, eyes bloodshot, shoulders tense, tie loosened. My study, now. I followed him without a word. He sat behind his massive desk, the one he'd always used to tower over people. But this time, I didn't sit in the guest chair. I leaned against the edge of the desk, calm, in control. He opened with no preamble. My attorneys confirmed it. The sale is legal. The board vote is final. I nodded. Of course. He stared at the papers in front of him, then up at me. So, what now? I answered plainly. We transition. Adams Software becomes the enterprise division of Everest Holdings. The Adams name stays, but management changes, structure changes, culture changes. And me? You'll be offered a chairman emeritus role. No operational power. Advisory only. It's a formality, a sign of respect. He looked away, then back again. You know, I never thought you had it in you. I know, I said. You never looked long enough to find out. He exhaled, deep and long. I built this company from nothing. So did I. And in that moment, something shifted. Not forgiveness, not connection, but understanding. 6 months later, I stood in the newly renovated lobby of Adams Everest Technologies. That was the new name. We kept Adams to honor the foundation. We added Everest to signal the future. And for the first time in its 40-year history, the company wasn't stuck in the past. The lobby walls were clean, modern. Digital displays replaced the dusty plaques. The old slogan, "Tradition through Technology," had been replaced with a simple one. Built to evolve. I looked at the wall of portraits. My grandfather, my father, and now, right in the center. No longer hidden, no longer minimized, just seen. My role as CEO of Everest Holdings had expanded. I now split my time between San Francisco and Boston. We had opened new offices, launched new product lines, and brought in a younger, more diverse leadership team. Revenue was up 32%. Client retention had reached 98%. But more than the numbers, something deeper had changed. My father had accepted the advisory role. He came into the office once a week, offered thoughts, shared old contacts. He didn't lead, but he learned to listen. And over time, our conversations shifted from transactional to human. Garrett, surprisingly, chose not to fight. He stepped down, repaid the stolen funds, then enrolled in business school, real business school. He even called me last week to ask for help with a case study on acquisitions. Megan rebranded herself. She leaned into the story, turned the family drama into a narrative of redemption, became the face of our consumer outreach campaigns. And surprisingly, it worked. She was good at it. Mom changed too. She joined a nonprofit that mentors young women in tech, said she wanted to make sure the next Morgan didn't grow up feeling invisible. And me. I kept building, but I also began healing. Because success, it turns out, isn't the same thing as peace. I had won. I had taken back control. I had proven every single one of them wrong. But that wasn't enough. Not anymore. Now, I wanted something harder. I wanted wholeness. And that meant letting go of some of the old bitterness, letting people earn their way back, not because they deserved it, but because I deserved the freedom of moving forward. This journey, this 10-year climb, had taught me something I didn't expect. Revenge feels powerful, but reconciliation feels complete. If you've ever been the overlooked one, the underestimated one, the one nobody expected to win, know this. You don't have to shout. You don't have to beg. You just have to build. Build something so undeniable, so brilliant, so strong that no one can ignore you again. And when the moment comes, speak clearly. Stand tall. Let them see exactly who you are. Thank you for watching my story. If it resonated with you, leave a comment. Share your own story. Tell us how you turned silence into strength. And don't forget to subscribe for more stories of transformation, power, and the kind of justice that doesn't just sting, it lasts. Because sometimes, the best revenge is building a better future.